Nelson Mandela, The Long Walk to Freedom. The hills of Mvezo stretched wide and peaceful under the golden African sun. The land was alive with quiet movement, the rustling of grass, the distant call of birds, and the steady rhythm of village life. It was here, in this calm and rooted world, that a boy named Nelson Mandela was born. To his family, he was Rolihlahla, a name meaning one who pulls the branch of a tree, or more simply, troublemaker. It was not meant as a warning, but as a reflection of spirit. Even as a child, there was something quietly restless about him. Mandela's early life was simple, yet deeply meaningful. He spent his days herding cattle with other boys, running barefoot across open fields, and learning the ways of his people. There were no walls to confine him, no limits to the sky above him. Freedom, in its purest form, was all he knew. But it was in the evenings, gathered around the fire, that his world truly expanded. The elders spoke in calm, deliberate tones, telling stories of African kings, lost lands, and the dignity of leadership. Mandela listened closely, absorbing every word. He noticed something important, not just the stories themselves, but how decisions were made. Leaders listened before they spoke. They valued every voice. Authority came not from force, but from respect. These lessons settled deep within him. One night, as the fire flickered and shadows danced across the walls, an elder spoke of injustice, of land taken, of rights denied. Mandela didn't fully understand, but he felt the weight of those words. Later, lying beneath a sky full of stars, he stared into the endless darkness above. A quiet thought formed within him. The world was bigger than this village, and somehow, his journey would lead him far beyond it. Leaving the comfort of Mvezo was the first true turning point in Mandela's life. The transition was not just physical, it was deeply personal. The open fields of his childhood were replaced by classrooms, uniforms, and strict routines. At school, Mandela encountered a new kind of order. Everything was structured, controlled, and influenced by colonial rule. It was here that he was given the name Nelson, a name assigned by his teacher. It was easier for them to pronounce, they said. He accepted it, but quietly questioned it. Why should his identity be reshaped to fit someone else's system? He didn't voice the question aloud, but it stayed with him. In the classroom, Mandela discovered the power of education. Books introduced him to new ideas, history, politics, and systems of governance. But something felt missing. The stories rarely reflected his own people. His culture was absent, as though it did not matter. Still, he paid attention. As he grew older, he began to notice patterns. There were differences in treatment, subtle at first, then undeniable. Opportunities were not equal. Some voices were heard, while others were ignored. Mandela watched carefully. He listened more than he spoke. Questions began to form. Why were things this way? Who decided these rules? And most importantly, could they be changed? These thoughts did not bring immediate answers. Instead, they created a quiet tension within him, a growing awareness that the world was not as fair as it should be. The boy who once ran freely across the hills was beginning to understand something deeper. Freedom was not guaranteed, and for many, it did not exist at all. Johannesburg was overwhelming. The city pulsed with life. Cars rushing through crowded streets, voices overlapping in constant motion, buildings rising high into the sky. It was a place of opportunity, but also of harsh realities. For Mandela, it was both. He arrived with determination, ready to build a future. But it didn't take long for him to see the truth beneath the surface. Inequality was not hidden here. It was enforced. Laws controlled where people could live, work, and move. The system was clear, and it was unforgiving. Mandela worked during the day and studied at night. Every moment was a step forward, but each day also exposed him to stories of struggle. People denied rights, families separated, lives restricted by rules they had no power to change. This was no longer distant. It was real. It was happening all around him. Mandela began to connect everything he had learned, the stories from his childhood, the lessons from school, the realities of the city. A pattern was forming, and it was impossible to ignore. He started to engage more actively. Conversations turned into debates. Observations turned into opinions, and slowly his voice began to rise. He met others who shared his concerns, people who believed that change was possible. Together they discussed ideas, strategies, and hopes for the future. The city was shaping him. It was sharpening his mind, strengthening his resolve, and pushing him towards something greater than himself. Mandela was no longer just learning about the world. He was preparing to change it. Mandela chose law as his path, not because it was easy, but because it offered understanding. He believed that if he could master the system, he could challenge it from within. Law school demanded discipline, and Mandela gave it everything he had. Long nights of study, endless reading, and constant pressure became part of his routine. But he remained focused. He knew what was at stake. Eventually, Mandela became one of the first black lawyers in Johannesburg. His work was not just a profession, it was a mission. Alongside his colleagues, he opened a law firm that welcomed those who had been pushed aside by the system. Their office became a place of hope. People came with stories, unjust arrests, unfair laws, broken rights. Mandela listened carefully to each case. He carried their struggles with him, allowing their voices to strengthen his purpose. But the deeper he went into the legal system, the clearer it became. The law was not neutral. It was designed to maintain control. This realization was difficult to accept. It meant that justice could not always be found within the system itself. It meant that change would require something more, something bigger. Mandela began to step beyond the courtroom. He joined movements, attended meetings, and worked alongside others who believed in equality. The risks were growing, but so was his determination. He was no longer just defending people. He was fighting for an entire nation. The air in South Africa had changed. What was once quiet frustration had grown into a powerful force of resistance. The streets no longer felt calm. They felt charged, alive with tension and urgency. Mandela stood at the center of it. Meetings became more intense, often held in secrecy. Voices were lower, but the emotions were stronger. Every plan carried risk, and every decision could have serious consequences. Mandela had become a leader, not by seeking power, but by earning trust. His presence brought focus. His words brought clarity. He understood that the struggle was not just about opposing injustice. It was about restoring dignity, identity, and freedom. Protests spread across cities. Crowds gathered, voices rising together in defiance. The energy was powerful, unified, and determined. But the response was swift. The government tightened its control. Laws became harsher. Surveillance increased. Arrests became more frequent. Mandela watched as peaceful resistance was met with force. The reality was clear. The system would not change easily. He faced a difficult truth. The road ahead would demand sacrifice. Time, freedom, safety, possibly everything, yet stepping back was not an option. The fire within him, ignited in childhood and strengthened through experience, now burned with unstoppable intensity. Mandela stood firm, fully aware of the risks. History was no longer something he would witness from a distance. He was now part of it, and the journey was only just beginning. If you enjoyed the story of Nelson Mandela, The Long Walk to Freedom, like this video and subscribe for more African legends and forgotten histories. Share this story and tell us in the comments which African legend we should tell next.